Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much to Visa for Music hosting us. It's a great pleasure being here with these amazing speakers. I'm delighted to be here and honored to be along these bright minds here. So with no further ado, I would like to invite our speakers to introduce themselves, and then we try to move forward with our talk today, and we hope you will enjoy it. And feel free to ask questions via all our social medias. We'll be happy to address them. So thank you so much. This is Visa for Music 2020 edition. It will be online due to COVID, but let's meet your expectations and make it fruitful for you guys. All right. So ladies first, who can start? Migogo, how about you start?
Okay, thanks, Raoul. My name is Nothando Migogo. I am a director and co-founder of Sosela Legal and Advisory. We are an advisory and strategic licensing consulting firm. That's a mouthful. But basically, we help and work with practitioners throughout the value chain of the creative industries. So whether it's artists, creators, their publishing houses, record labels, production houses, from a film perspective, etc. We basically just give them the support to help develop and execute their strategies. And obviously we're deeply rooted in the legal aspect and legal side of things. But before that, I've worked at 3 collective management organizations in South Africa. I've headed up SAMRO, CAPASSO, and DALRO. So that's looking at 3 different types of copyright management: performing rights, mechanical rights, and reprographic literary rights. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
Thank you. Gora, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Happy to be part of this year's Visa for Music online. My name is Marcus Gora. I am from Zimbabwe. I work in Harare and Victoria Falls. My primary work is I work as a band manager for a touring group called Makoomba, which is also from Zimbabwe. It is a sort of an award-winning group that is toured maybe by now more than 60 countries around the world. And I am a partner in a company called Ngomani Ohosho, which is an innovative sort of arts promotion company, which does a lot of work building sort of industry capacity here in Zimbabwe through sort of identifying, developing, and nurturing sort of emerging talent across the board. So from artists to practitioners and managers and sound engineers. So it's a sort of like a big tent company. And in that company, we also run a live concert series called Live Sessions, which happens every quarterly, and it's normally showcasing emerging bands, but we also get to invite international acts from time to time. And our sort of large event is an annual music festival called Jacaranda Music Festival, which has been running for 3 years and has now sort of in our context of Harare grown to having an audience of more than 12,000 people. And it's also very international, and we try to bring in artists from outside of Zim paired with a lot of our own local established and emerging artists. And we also have, as part of the festival, a workshop program which tries to again accelerate our efforts to build sort of industry capacity in Zimbabwe, and hopefully that can go to other places as well. So in a nutshell, on the music side of things, that is part of what I do. I also am a co-founder and director of a premier sort of visual art space here in Harare called First Floor Gallery. it's important because then that's where a lot of the cross-disciplinary collaborations happen with people from film and from visual arts and also from music. So I think we're pretty active in the local scene. So that will be my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gora. Lucy.
Thank you so much, Raoul. I'm very pleased to meet all of you and also to participate in this edition of Visa for Music 2020. My name is Lucy Ilado. I am a music journalist based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm currently the East African content editor for the Music in Africa Foundation based in Johannesburg. The Music in Africa Foundation is an arts Pan-African organization, and we are basically a music information and exchange portal for the African music sector. So we are providing information about the music industry, and also we are providing a platform for different stakeholders within the music industry to connect and collaborate. We have 4 satellite offices. One is in Nairobi for the East African region. We have one for West Africa Francophone, which is in Senegal. We have one for the Central African region, which is in DRC, Congo. And then finally, we have one in Nigeria for the West African region. So apart from the online platform, we also run some offline projects with artists, and we have one successful project, which is sort of a workshop on instrument building. So we bring in sort of older musicians to collaborate with younger artists, learn how to build instruments, how to repair, and how to play. And we also give out some grants, and which this year we were very much able to support artists during this COVID-19 pandemic. We had the Music in Africa Live grant, which was supposed to support showcases and also support capacity building for artists and other creatives within the music sector. So I think that's it for now.
Thank you so much. Faty, how are you?
Hello, Raoul. Hello, everyone, to all the panelists. It's my pleasure to be a part of this conversation, although I will be standing as I will bring my grain of salt as an observer because I'm not part of the music business currently, but I have been in the music business from a media standpoint. I used to be a radio host and a producer for several years, but also a cultural activist, doing advocacy through culture and arts, mainly music and cinema, which are 2 domains that are completely intertwined. I served currently as a media expert in a foreign organization, and I do also some cultural programming. And I have been observing the media and the social media over the past 9 months during this pandemic. And bringing in a few notes and observations from the change that operated throughout the past 9 months. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So the first question everyone was asking himself or herself was, how did you guys cope with this COVID? In your respective domains, let's hear from you the best practices. I know COVID wasn't a good thing for this sector, but it was surely a good time to come up with new ideas, create and all. So how did you manage this time of COVID? Let's start with Faty.
Excuse me, Raoul, let's give the floor to Wiseman. He's maybe part of the panel. He's around.
He will get his time as well.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it, yeah.
Well, surprisingly, you know what? It's been a pretty tough period of time, particularly, you know, having to switch from the physical world technically into telework and limiting social events, including the culture and the arts. I was very, you know, active, going to concerts and exhibitions and whatnot. So it's really, it took a toll on, I guess, everyone else's psychological health. Surprisingly, what made us, or what made me and the group of friends stand strong during these enduring times is music, actually, and live music online. So it was basically a good way, a good form to cope with the pandemic, since most of us, I guess, in the region and throughout the world, were not capable of moving around freely. So music has been pivotal in this era, and I'd like to thank all the people and the resilient artists that provided that little hope in our lives as supporters and audience member. But yeah, it's mainly music online. So
this is an interesting time for people like Gora and the band and all. How did you cope, and how did you create? How was it positive for you guys?
Wow, I mean, I must be very honest and say that the whole COVID pandemic has been a total sort of disaster for artists, because for me as a band manager, I'll tell you that we last had a paid gig in March of this year. And that was where we could perform live. And then after that, there was this lockdown for us, which was a very hard lockdown. Maybe not, in retrospect, maybe not as necessary, because our numbers haven't been as bad. I mean, we've been lucky that our numbers have been really low. And we have now started to reopen. But I think in as far as sort of livelihoods for artists is concerned, those have been decimated. And it's been really difficult for African governments in particular to come up with any sort of interventions that could really assist. I mean, save for a few, I think in a lot of countries, there hasn't been any sort of direct intervention to help artists get by through this really difficult time. And on my other side, where we do events, we just haven't been able to do many events. And with our festival, the Jacaranda Music Festival, we're just on a wait and see basis right now, because we don't know whether we're going to be allowed to do the show this year. And the restrictions also are keeping the numbers really low. So it might not be also profitable to do such an event, and maybe also irresponsible if the cases then are going to go up. So it's been a really tough time for musicians. And I think in as much as the online platforms have been sort of like a stopgap measure, they have been helping keep the artists visible and active, but on the revenue side, it's just not been as good, and it's been really difficult for artists. So for now, I think that would be my response, and I'll love to learn from others how they have approached this or been impacted by the pandemic.
Lucy, how about you?
So for us, first of all, at Music in Africa, of course, we had to cancel our annual music conference, Access, which was this year supposed to take place in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So we moved it to next year. In terms of content, we are getting a lot of new music. The artists are releasing a lot of new music. I think now there's enough time for people to write music and record, for those who have home studios or can have access to recording studios. We also have a lot of opportunities for artists for next year. So we are also seeing there's a lot of it's these articles, specifically these opportunity articles, are receiving a lot of traction, which means that musicians are looking for, already thinking about next year, what am I going to be doing? Hopeful perhaps that this situation will get better by next year and they can be able to get back on their feet and do what they love. Talking about the East African region, in Kenya, of course, the government put out a stimulus package for musicians and visual artists, and also those in film. and the money was allocated to different institutions within the cultural ministry, and they were able to distribute this in their own way. First, there is no much transparency on how this was done, but the money was released. We know that, and that's all that we know. In Uganda, I know particularly that there is also musicians have been doing a lot of online concerts, but there is this new platform called Feza, which has emerged as one of the platforms where artists can perform and actually get paid or get some money, because now the fans can buy tickets and watch concerts their favorite artists. In Tanzania, of course, much of I'm sure most of you know life is almost as normal as it can be in Tanzania. The music industry wasn't so much disrupted. I know the biggest issue is internet, so also streaming was a bit of a challenge for some artists who could not perform outside the country. But yes, in Tanzania, pretty much the music scene was, lively, and I mean that they're still having concerts. The entertainment zones were still opening, and this is what's not happening in Kenya and Tanzania, and I believe other East African countries.
Wonderful. I think Wiseman didn't introduce himself. My apologies, my bad. Can you introduce yourself and then take also the question?
Thanks, Raoul. So from by way of introduction, I think, so I primarily work for an organization called CAPASSO, which is the Composers, Authors and Publishers Association. So CAPASSO is in essence a collective management organization that, but I think the key focus has been the consolidation of African rights across the continent for purposes of licensing on digital. So that's been our primary focus over the past 4 odd years. At the moment, we are responsible for licensing activities on digital platforms for over 20 CMOs across the continent, which then allows the likes of your Apple Musics, your Spotify's, YouTube Music to be able to launch in multiple territories across the continent. And it allows then rights holders, primarily Pan-African rights holders, to be able to then earn from the exploitation of their works on those platforms. So that's what we do on a daily basis. And as far as how have we navigated COVID, so with the close of life, what has happened is we've seen since March, there was a huge balloon in online activity. So that huge balloon in online activity basically meant we went from getting probably 1 live stream license every 6 months to getting over 100 in a week license requests. So the time that we were spending alongside trying to license events, and the problem was also that the amount of time it took to explain to people the need to get live streaming licenses in order to compensate the writers who had unfortunately lost a lot of potential royalties from the closure of gigs, took up the lion's share of our time. And then the subsequent payments. So what COVID has really done is the consumption is ballooned, whereas the remuneration has basically shrunk. So you were getting licenses that we were putting in place that were taking you hours and hours to put in place from an explanatory perspective, from down to an administrative perspective, but the resultant remuneration to the eventual composers who've written that music was in essence pittance, because no one really had the money. Most were trying to figure out how to go about doing it. There weren't really proper monetization structures that were there at the beginning. We're starting to see a bit more now from fans buying, but the reality is, and I think it speaks more to the topic, is we haven't really even started seeing how we can use the online space to offset not only the money, but also the experience we have when we go to live shows in physical settings.
Thank you so much. You said something I will come back to later on. But first, let's hear Migogo about the COVID situation in your domain, in your sector and business.
Thanks, Raoul. I think, to echo most of what everyone has said, it was obviously very traumatic. It's been very traumatizing. I mean, looking at the clients that we work with, the one client that I work very closely with is a record label with a number of artists, and it was really traumatic for people to literally not have any revenue. And it actually, I think what it highlighted is the over-reliance on live. I think we always knew that we make most of our money from live music, but when we're in this situation, it really brought home that reality. And the positive, I think, was that we started having real conversations with artists around alternative revenue streams. I mean, sometimes you try and talk to artists about, look, is your publishing in order? Are your documents at the collective management organizations in order? And it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like at the end of the day, Friday, Saturday night, I'm gigging, and that's where most of my money comes from. So it gave us an opportunity as an industry to really start looking at the business models that artists have, and start saying, okay, what should we have in place and what isn't in place? We're fortunate that so from a music perspective, the CMOs, CAPASSO and SAMRO, continued distributing, and I mean, for our clients, that made a very, very big difference. Whereas in some years, it's just okay, I've got some royalties coming, it doesn't matter. Suddenly, those royalties meant, is your rent being paid or not for these 2 or 3 or however many months. So I think that pushed artists quite a bit. In South Africa, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture also had an initiative where artists were able to apply for some relief. And it worked quite well, but in a very limited way. And I think that limitation is actually what is part of the big part of, not the entire, but part of the problem as to why a number of artists haven't benefited from the boom in online streaming. So to apply for this relief, you had to get a form and an email, fill it out, email it. You needed to be online to understand what's happening, to get the dates. A lot of people don't have that kind of access. So as much as, the relief is there, it's practically who can access it, Yes, in South Africa, about 66% or so urbanization. And when you say, because the topic we're looking at is the urban scene. And when you say urban scene, the number of assumptions around access, around infrastructure, around knowledge. But a lot of people in the urban setting don't have the kind of access to internet that is required to consume live concerts and stream. So a lot of people may be online, but it's just online enough to do your Facebook and your WhatsApp, not to listen to an hour-long show. And so that's both as the audience member and as an artist. And I think those are some of the challenges that we face, because you can see that, okay, here's a whole new other environment. COVID has presented us a new opportunity to go online and reach wider audiences, et cetera, but really how many people can fully take advantage of that? And even if they can, the issue around the remuneration remains a very big thing, because do we have the policies in place, the legal infrastructure, the implementation agencies to ensure that those monies that are earned online actually do go to those people? So it's a bittersweet thing. Yes, we can now go online, we can do a lot more, do more, but in particularly now on our continent, our communities, not everyone has the ability to really maximize those opportunities as perhaps in other regions.
Thank you so much, Migogo. That's interesting. Gora, let's go more practical on this situation. Do digital platforms constitute new showcases for artists at a time when social distancing is the order of the other day?
First, I'll start by echoing what Migogo highlighted, because we have that as a reality here in Zimbabwe, where access to data is a big issue for a lot of people to be able to consume content. And the numbers become even smaller. So you start to talk about even, say, 10, 15% of our population, which can be able to be online for a reasonable amount of time to consume content. And then maybe the rest relies on sort of like diasporas, where there are maybe then Zimbabweans in the UK or any other country that has the infrastructure that is able to consume content. But then again, I would also add to that other complications now which are coming around, discussions around, say, taxation for any earnings that come from those platforms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and also issues to do with censorship, which do not disappear simply because now you're online. Doesn't mean that if there was an issue, depending on country, to do with censorship, the online experience is now this sort of golden panacea that is going to solve everything. So I think the way that we are approaching the online sort of hype is that we are approaching with caution, because my experience now has been that it has become really difficult to match the experience. So of course, when the band that I manage, Makoomba, is like a high energy band, they love to play big festivals, and all of a sudden to put them in a living room or in a garage where there's no audience that they can feed off of, it's a totally different experience. And I think the online thing has been oversold, because in our context, the opportunities that accrue in other countries that are developed. So for example, right now, there are some artists who are getting signed wholesale by platforms like Twitch or Spotify. And these are big deals, because the numbers that they get in terms of the potential streams and potential clicks and views are huge compared to what an African artist with their niche audience would be able to get. So in as much as people are saying that is the future, it's not the future for us yet. I think there are so many limitations that we are having to then encounter with the live. I mean, here people have also tried. You know, I've been to a few drive-in concerts here, and I've been to a few house parties which then get shut down by the police. You know, and it's all sort of in an effort to show that the live is still here to stay. And then the hope maybe is that maybe there's a vaccine, or there's this German study that was done recently of a concert where they tried to prove that the spread in such a context is not that great. So again, in terms of revenue streams, we're just not there yet in terms of saying that we can multiply. Yes, there are royalties here and there, but they're also small for artists that are, say, emerging. And that's a whole large group of artists that we have to consider, where the reality is not the same. So we have been thinking solutions, and I'll just quickly add that we now starting to collaborate a bit more, maybe as a result. So we are, for example, doing a collaboration with the Nyege Nyege Festival in Uganda, where we are doing a hybrid form of festival where on the 3rd and to the 6th of December, they will do some parties in Uganda, but they'll also have an online program where us as Jacaranda Music Festival have curated and pre-recorded sort of some shows that will then stream with them. But this is more of a marketing opportunity and more of a sort of opportunity to collaborate for the future, as opposed to saying that this is going to be a replacement of experience or a replacement of income. So there are things that are starting to happen. Lastly, I'll just add that we, together with some collaborators, there's a woman called Stephanie Schumann and Julia Castile, and at some festivals and venues, we've come up with actually a solidarity fund, spelled Solidarity, so SOULIDARTY. where we are now saying, look, for the bulk of African musicians who sustain their livelihoods through touring, that has also been decimated, and they've been unable to travel, they've been unable to tour, and that has sort of completely wiped out their potential to earn. So we have come up with a fund, which we are now appealing to sort of everyone to join. We have so many bands that have applied, and we have been releasing these bands on our social media networks, and they're both emerging and established. That's how serious this is. But the fund is going to be maybe one off the sort of interventions that can be put in place to just help these bands continue to make music and continue to wait for a time when we can see each other live. I think that's how we are, all going to sort of try to approach it.
Wonderful. You're responding to all my questions I had in one. I will struggle. So I guess all of us believe in the fact that the live music will never be replaced by these digital events. That's for sure. Who doesn't agree? We all agree, right? So my next question will be for Lucy. Well, we know that the live will always have to make money for us, right? But how do we create value with these tools we have now, today, during these times?
Thank you, Raoul. First, I would just love to add into what Marcus was talking about. I think the Solidarity Fund is a really great initiative, and especially for those people who are in an influential position, I think that is a cause that we can all strive to be part of, because there's a lot of artists that stand to benefit from such an initiative. First of all, let me first mention that technology has always been there. But a lot of artists have really never taken advantage of it. And COVID-19 has merely just accelerated its use. And so we are seeing an awakening of artists. Everybody is online. So we are seeing musicians turning into content creators. We are seeing musicians setting up YouTube channels and having programs like interviewing each other, giving tutorials on how to play different instruments, having conversations like what we are having. So these are things that I believe would not have happened if COVID-19 had not come. So that should be like an upside of the positive sort of side of COVID-19, that it has awakened, and musicians are now realizing that we need other avenues of becoming relevant and also earning income. But also for those of us who work in the cultural space, it has brought up the question of remuneration, because there is no structure of monetization. So what we have been discussing about is about the cultural policy. So a lot of African countries do not have a proper, or the cultural policy that's in existence does not include the internet. You see, so a lot of these policies were gazetted, I should say, before internet was really one of the tools that creatives were using. So the countries came up with the cultural policies and then came up with the Copyright Act, and these two things do not really include ways or a structure on how musicians are supposed to get money online. So that has now become a challenge for the creatives, especially those in government, the ministries, to now go back and talk about it, because a lot of countries are now reviewing the Copyright Act. So those are things that need to be included. So that's something that has come up. On whether live can replace, digital can replace live, of course it cannot. We went to smell, we went to dance, we went to hear the noise, we went to see people go crazy. And that's the beauty of live music. So you just don't want to sit. It can work for football, it can work for, I don't know what else, but it cannot really satisfy your urge for music. If you're told for an entire year, you just have to watch people on your screen and not really get to experience the live music. So the answer is no. Maybe just to add on and mention that some of the tools that I'm also seeing a lot of artists using is the Instagram and TikTok. TikTok is very popular on this side, and so the musicians are using that as a platform to promote their music. There are musicians that on an ordinary day would not have made headlines, but because of TikTok, they're now, we can call them superstars. And I think that's also thanks to the digital space.
Thank you, Lucy. Wiseman, you raised your hand, but I was coming for you. Please say something, and then I'll ask my question.
Thanks, man. I just wanted to highlight something that I think is probably, even in the question, I feel like it's almost like it's a leading question, but it's a fundamental flaw in how we are understanding the opportunity of digital, right? Particularly as it relates to live performance. What we're trying to do now is fit a square pin into a round plug, in the sense that we're trying to use these digital platforms to try and recreate physical settings. And that's where we're struggling, and that's where I feel as an industry we're coming up short. What the opportunity with digital isn't necessarily to replace the physical setting, but it's an opportunity to create a whole new setup that is completely different and a whole new different experience. And I'll use an example of probably the biggest concert we've seen over the past has it been 6 to 9 months, which was Travis Scott on Fortnite. It was an immersive experience of gamers going into the game, watching Travis Scott perform as an avatar in the game. So the idea was, let's stretch what we know as a performance, think of a different way in which we can use it, and therein lies the opportunity of digital. It's not necessarily to try and recreate an audience interacting with you and you just playing your guitar and singing your song back and asking them to sing the song back to you. That is the traditional setting, and that's not a setting that we should probably be looking to replace. You should probably be looking at how we supplement that. Like over the past 6 to 9 months, we've seen a huge rise in social music, i.e. fans interacting with the music that artists are creating spin-off content of those songs, trying to engage. And that's the opportunity that digital gives us. We're going to see more from, not even just from a performance thing, as we delve more into virtual reality, we're going to see more collaborations with artists creating the content along with their fans. And those are the opportunities that we should be looking at. And I feel like if we think of it as trying to replace a live concert, we're limiting the possibilities. The possibilities are huge. And I think the Travis Scott is the example. I mean, 12.3 million people watched that show. And it wasn't a show, and it's 12.3 million people. And because of the way in which it was structured, what we experience is a screen fatigue, because anybody who's tried to put on a live show or a webinar over the past 6 months or a meeting will tell you that after an hour 15, really it feels like you've been in a room in a physical meeting for about 4 hours, because you get on-screen fatigue. So we're still going to figure out ways of how to get our audience interacting with us on the digital platforms such that they don't get that on-screen fatigue. Because in the physical settings, what they would have is getting bumped by the other fans, touching the hands of the performer, doing other things that will then distract them from the monotony, if you will, for lack of a better word, of a song playing after the next song after the next song. So there's so many different elements that if you try to recreate that with the screen and the camera, you're falling short, and you're not really using digital for what it should be.
For sure, there are things that will have to be created. VR will help us, AI will help us with that. But that's for sure. But you gave a good example on what Scott did with Fortnite, right? But that implies also all the infrastructures, all the political wills, all the the things around it that makes it happen. But the question is, yourself dealing with royalty, CMO stuff, how does one a creator now, during this time, monetize his creations and make it a living, make a living from those collections, that money collected during these times? How does one do it with your expertise and actually experience with CAPASSO?
All right. So that's actually a twofold question, but I'll answer it in this way. The first part is metadata. Like if you've written music, you need to ensure that your metadata is in order. That's the only way you can earn royalties, and that's if we as the administrators have the full understanding, the full metadata of your work. Because as we run around trying to monetize, so for instance, most of the platforms that we saw mushrooming, as I said, we tried to put in place licenses with those platforms. So so the only way you can then get the money out of those platforms is by ensuring that your metadata is in order. Make sure every songwriter credit is up to date. Make sure every single person who partook in the creation of that content is credited, and then make sure all the CMOs have that information. Register with the CMOs, make sure they have that, that information on hand, because the ability to then identify the use of your work is dependent on that metadata. The music industry is a data industry. Data is life, data is money. Without that data around songs, around everything else, in fact, it's a symbiotic relationship, because the metadata also increases your consumption. The more your song has better lyrics, the more your song has better metadata, the better chances of it being algorithmically selected on the DSPs and pushed up into people's radar for consumption purposes. So metadata is actually the end all be all of a very successful earning musician going forward. And then the other flip side is when we look at how and why the physical concerts earn that much money, is because they have sponsorship. It's because alcoholic brands can spend R1 million on sponsoring a show because they know they'll be able to then recoup that. So as an industry, it's time now for us to figure out how do we give them that value proposition so that they can spend those money, because the reason we couldn't monetize to that extent the live shows online was because we didn't have the backing of those sponsors that would eventually run up the money that we eventually pay the musicians on the physical concerts. They didn't have the value add, and they were a bit scared about how this was all going to work. We then need to figure out as an industry, how do we show them the value proposition without the traditional blinkers of this is the value proposition I get on the physical side and I must get it on the digital. But how do we give them that value proposition to then eventually widen the pie? Once you've widened the pie, the money then becomes a bit easier. But crucially, metadata, metadata, metadata.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wiseman. You tapped into something which is totally a business-oriented topic. I want to talk to Migogo about it. I know you have focused and worked in the business world of the creative industry. How do you do business when there is no business really in this field, right? We are not doing business per se, but still there is another form of doing business. What are your advices or your from your experiences? How do we do business during these times? And from what Wiseman said, sponsors are used to sponsor a physical event, right, where they will see people coming over. But when we see something like Scott's event, where you have 3 million audience following you, or 30 million people following you, it's more business for you, right? So how do we do business during these times, taking your experiences and the current experiences, like Scott's concert with Fortunate?
Yeah. Sure, that's a big question, you know, because it has there's so many variables and so many things that need to be in place. And it's kind of not the sexy answer that, you know, people want, but it's the reality. Before I delve deep into that, I just want to really to echo what Wiseman has said about not trying to replace, or this is the new life. And another, you know, an example of that is just, remember when we moved from physical to online for the very first time, physical assets, CDs and tapes and whatever, and we moved to downloading. At that time, when streaming started creeping in, people couldn't fathom it, because at least downloading was like, I'm buying a digital CD. It's however many dollars, rand, whatever, that like I'm replacing it. So it was something that our minds could. Now when this whole streaming thing started coming, people couldn't fathom that, because it was like, but how is this replacing the CD? But the thing is, it's not replacing the CD. It's a completely different thing and should have its own rules, and we should approach it very specifically. So I think this whole digital conversation, that is such an important principle to bear in mind, that we're not replacing, it's another, we're adding on. And an important thing is that once COVID disappears, online, the streaming, etc., shouldn't disappear. That's in itself is a whole thing that artists should keep as part of the activities that they do. They stream, they do live shows, they, you know, work with DSPs. It's not a replacement that will disappear. But to go to your question of how do you do business during this time, you know, so I'm saying it's not a sexy answer because, you know, it's really boring. It goes back to, okay, is the environment, is the ecosystem in place to allow us to do business at this time? What is the ecosystem? To start at the very, very top, we're talking about policies and political will earlier. Is the government in your country concerned and concerning itself about the policies that affect cultural industries, that affect copyright industries, that affect the music industry, et cetera, et cetera? Secondly, if they do, if the political will is there, I think Lucy was talking about the fact that then the Copyright Acts and other related and relevant acts, are they in place? A lot of countries are members, you know, internationally of organizations, you know, and signatories to the WIPO treaties, etc. But does your domestic legislation reflect that? Because at the end of the day, if the law is silent on whether or not I can monetize a certain activity, that's a problem. Then you have a number of African countries where the law is in place, but now who's going to implement that law? Are the collective management agencies in place for that? You know, and this is a very real problem on our continent. We don't have those three: political will, the regulatory and legislative environment, and then the implementing agencies. Very few countries have those three in place correctly. So that's already a stumbling block, because is the environment there? Now on the flip side, when we look at so let's park that and say, okay, fine. Let's say we don't have the law, the legislation in place. Maybe we don't have the right agencies in place, but still, I can go online and I can sell my tickets. People can, you know, buy tickets. I think one of the difficulties that people are facing is that they want to sell for the same price that they would sell a normal ticket. But we've just spoken at length about, when you go to a live show, you're not just going for the music, like in auditory, you're not just going to listen to them. It's an experiential thing. It's a spiritual thing. You know, it's music, if you look at us as Africans, is the core bedrock of all our spiritual practices anyway. So you're going there to experience something with your entire mind, body, and soul. So already that price is questionable. You know, people are like, well, is it really worth that much money? I don't know. And this is, for me, I believe, the opportunity for brands to really step up. And because if something is pitched well online, it will give those brands mileage. And I think brands have benefited so much from music and from artists all these years. from partnering, you know, with music. And music just drives so much that people are in denial about. I mean, like you get into a meeting with a corporate and you're now having to explain to them how this music is adding value. They act like they don't know, yet they always want to use music, but they don't want to pay for it or whatever it is. So I think brands need to come up during this time and partner with the creative industries, because with their sponsorship, you know, even if you don't have the other legislative and political things in place, the corporate sectors, you know, can really step up. But the reality of the situation is that they're also facing, the thing is, the entire ecosystem is in trouble. Those brands are facing, they're retrenching their own employees. So now they're going to cut back on marketing. They're going to cut back on it. It's just tough. I think, you know, some of these questions, I just want to say, like, I really don't know. I think people who say, no, we know, I don't think that's true, because everyone is still trying to figure it out. It's just a very difficult thing. The only thing you can do, for me, like what I tell my clients, is number one, obviously, keep pushing, keep recording. If you can't perform, then at least record and try and get stuff out there on digital platforms. Record. Get your business in order. This is an opportunity to consolidate yourself as a business. I mentioned earlier, you know, making sure that, like what Wiseman was saying, that your metadata in all the collecting societies that you're a member of, that it's correct. Making sure that you know, your business affairs are in order whilst we wait it out. And now it's starting to open up slowly. You know, still numbers are limited, but I really don't think there's a sexy answer that's a one size fits all, that this is what you need to do. It's hard. Everyone is suffering.
So, thank you so much. There is this game corporates always play, the chicken egg game, which starts, which came after, which came before. We know the creatives, artists can definitely increase their sales, their businesses, but at the same time they will require they need that investment from them to help them increase their businesses. So I think it's a game of, it's a mindset game that we need to play, and it's our role creating and coming up with solutions to make it happen. But Faty, you have been organizing events, you have yourself been a DJ, so you know the artistic side. During these times, we have seen growth of online events, right? I have experienced a friend of mine who did an event and managed to do between, I think it was about 5,000 euros. And it was an online thing, right? But I haven't heard many people making money on online events, right? What do you think? What do you think about that? How can we make those events that people can feel comfortable in paying for online?
Thank you for your question, and I would like to thank all of the panelists, because a lot of eye-opening aspects of what Africa is currently going through from the musical perspective. In Morocco, it's not so different from what you guys have highlighted in your talk. It was really it took a really hard toll on the not so developed industry in Morocco, because we have lots of levels, you know, in the Moroccan musical industry. They're established, the musical traditional pop musicians are part of the traditional broadcast system and royalty system as well. And then there's urban music, which struggles already a lot and has been struggling for over 20 years. So in terms of royalties, it's really controversial in Morocco, because there was a recovery plan that was established by the Ministry of Culture amidst the outbreak, but urban musicians were not part of that vision, unfortunately. What could be considered an interesting win-win, you know, transition for musicians, but also for audience, public members, but also, as she outlined, brands, corporations, and event companies and venues, is that they organized some sort of sit down, a Zoom call like this one, and they tried to reestablish and standardize the business, you know, as it is now. It is half digital, it's not 100% digital. To answer your question, the methods of payment are still, you know, physical. Like, okay, you are I organized a couple of concerts a few months back. So basically it was a product that the musicians marketed and sold, and then we pay them the regular way, not through digital, we do not quantify the views nor the outreach online. It's really, you know, a transaction, the old ways like gigs used to happen. So maybe establish some sort of standardized way using these new platforms that the panelists have already mentioned. Instagram is there. Brands are also eager to you know, collaborates with musicians, established musicians. TikTok is also a nice springboard for emerging artists. You mentioned Travis Scott. There's also this singer from Australia named Sam Ryder who emerged on TikTok during COVID, and now everyone wants to sign him in labels once it's over. YouTube could also play a role. The Moroccan scene has already, you know, made it to YouTube and social media platforms for lack of, you know, traditional support systems like the radio and TV, but they could also discuss new ways of quantifying or budgetizing, or, you know, at least measuring the musical product, you know, per se. What is also interesting, or maybe the bright side of this non-physical world, is that African musicians are no longer required to go through the hassle of traveling abroad, particularly to northern countries. So basically your product becomes more and more universal, international. You get to sell your concert to Sweden and to South Africa and to Southeast Asia without having the accommodation, travel fees, the visa process and whatnot. This is also something that could be discussed with the venue owners or with the organizers. Well, listen, I know you're asking me for a lower price because this is a digital performance, but at the same time, you are saving these, you know, you are saving these fees and things. Let's cut the cake, you know, in half. And this is also something that could be done amongst the musicians, not so much at the local level or the national level, but, you know, African musicians, for instance, could establish formats like this is so-and-so, this is the format we could use, this is the platform we could use, this is the duration. These are the technical aspects and standards of such and such, you know, product. Just that we could ensure that everyone gets an equitable and an equal you know, revenue for the moment. But I'm pretty sure that, you know, we're not there yet. It is a good backup plan. It is a good crisis training for musicians and artists in general, also performers of all sorts. But for countries like ours, where we don't have that, as a specialist mentioned, you know, the three constants and the political will and the technical aspect and the, you know, the payment processes for these artists. We will keep it digital for the performative aspect of it, but the payment methods will still remain quite, you know, archaic and somewhat informal for now. So yeah, that's my grain of salt for the Moroccan side.
Thank you so much, Faty. You are very right, and that drives to my question to Gora. You mentioned something on skills. I think whatever we do, whatever we are trying to create in this space, in this industry, is mainly going to require reskilling ourselves, bringing capacity to those players in these industries. But how do you what is your approach in Zimbabwe or any other country you might know? What are the experiences you got on that?
Thanks. So what I would do is to try to go back a little bit and touch on something that Nothando and Wiseman were talking about, which is, you know, like the framing of the question seemed to pit, you know, live versus digital. And I totally agree that these are gonna exist side by side. And I think that it's too early to tell, because then the only fair assessment of what digital interventions have worked will only be be realized when we have a time when they are competing equally. So the live is now back in its full form, and then the digital is also existing in whichever way it has evolved. And then see if somebody is sitting on their couch having to choose on a night whether to watch the fortnight or to go to the concert where it's been proven safe and blah. So I think there will be that sort of pooling from the side to side, but it's a win for artists. So the more the revenue streams that are going to develop, the better. And to get to your question, I think the retooling has to happen because we are coming back to a live that is totally different in the sense that so many venues have closed, for example, right now. It's a live that's coming back to expensive tickets because of all the protocols that are going to be implemented or forced on venues or festivals or whatever. It's going to cost money. Before you just go in, set up and leave. Now you have to fumigate. You have to make sure there are temperature checks. You have to make sure that there's going to be a lot of protocols that will increase the cost. And the number of people that were paying tickets before were many, but now maybe we'll start by limiting them and there are fewer and blah. So sometimes even breaking even is going to be difficult. So in terms of coming back, we are now looking at a different skill set. For me, it points to maybe an ability to collaborate a bit more in the sense that we have missed opportunities before of this sort of already available cross-disciplinary collaboration, where even people who are in tech, for example, could come into the art space to help us with our new modes of, say, ticketing. Or I think there's just been a lot of even cross-disciplinary, like dancers and musicians and blah, are going to have to create these maybe hybrid experiences, which are going to deviate slowly or slightly from the sort of traditional concert crowd sitting down, blah. So I feel like there is a lot of exploring to do. And unfortunately, there's no school that is going to teach any of us how to respond to this. And like what Nothando was saying, there are no people who know exactly what to do right now. Even the so-called experts are grappling with how we are going to have to recreate and rethink and retool. Part of what we are doing as Jacaranda this year is that we have this workshop program that we normally do for the festival. So we will do it on the 3rd and to the 6th of December in collaboration with the Nyega Nyega program. And we are going to have a series of sort of thought sessions and workshops and blah to talk specifically about all these things, what skills, what the future, short-term, medium-term, and long-term is going to look like for the entertainment business, for the arts and culture sector. Because mind you, it's not only artists that are struggling, it's also the nighttime economy, where the guy who was parking a car at a concert, or the guy who was selling chips and cigarettes outside, or the sound engineer and the lighting engineer and the booking agent and all. So it's a whole ecosystem that has been disrupted and is struggling right now. And even the online, I'll tell you that there are online stars here in Zimbabwe who have been unable to exist beyond the hit. So they're online, but they haven't cultivated an audience. They don't have an audience that feels them or will buy their stuff or their merch or will support them long term. So what do? You know, like their hit expires, they stop trending, and then they look to gimmicks. You know, here we had such an unfortunate incident where one of the artists who had like a big hit, it was like over 1 million hits and whatever, the moment things start to slow down a little bit, there's no audience, there's nothing. He was doing some kind of a small thing where then he, you know, kicked some guy off stage and blah, and it was all choreographed to keep them trending. It's such a sad state if you then have to come up with these sort of desperate measures to keep relevant and to continue when, you know, like there should be then some kind of a hybridity between that digital and a live which has that sort of physical, personal, and emotional and spiritual connection. So I totally appreciate the question. I think there's a lot that we need to think about in terms of skills, and the skills have to be developed now by people who are thinking outside the box.
So I think, thank you so much, Gora. I think something about this industry is also it's something we learn on the go. It's not something where you go read a book and find out everything you needed. So that requires also, and I strongly believe in the fact that if players, creators and music players in the music industry, by coming together, all of us, it will bring more opportunities and more chances to make it happen, to see the other side. So, Wiseman, would you tell us a bit about the Joint African Licensing Hub and how it's gonna help an African artist, and how it could be something artists could leverage on and bet on for a better tomorrow, if I can say so.
Okay, thanks, man. So I think the long and short of it is the hub is another iteration of the music industry trying to solve or grapple with digitization, right? So traditionally, CMOs have operated in their own territorial spaces. And what digital did is basically decimate all those borders. So suddenly you make a song in your bedroom, you upload it today, it's a viral sensation across the world. And what that does, it then gives an opportunity for you to see how you can, almost how can the licensing activities follow that consumption. So you suddenly have a musician. I'll use a contemporary example. You have Jerusalem, that is a big song across the continent, right? So how can the licensing activity for Gaugelo and Nomcebo, who wrote that song, follow that consumption? You then realize that traditionally, the CMO had almost like a monopolistic element in its own territory. That monopoly was now threatened by digital, and then that territory also got decimated, which then called for a new version of what a CMO is. And this version is, in essence, what the hub is, which is a coming together of all of these different CMOs to then say, instead of doing it piecemeal in each of the 54/59 territories we have in our continent, how can we then have a unified licensing activity? And it does one of two things. The first, it allows the DSPs to come into our territories easily, because as they sit in there, we've spoken about infrastructural problems that we have. So they have all the excuse to say, we might not go into that region because it's just too difficult to launch. We can't build the client. Also, the licensing is fragmented. It's just going to cause too much heartache. Let's just focus on other territories, right? So what we then do is to say, maybe besides the infrastructural problems, besides the billing issue, besides the data issue, let the licensing problem not be an issue. Let us have an ability to pull our rights and have them say, okay, if I want to launch in Africa, I just need to go and speak to one centralized hub, and I know I have the full bouquet of African songwriters available to me. And then for the songwriters, it gives us this ability, right? It gives us the ability to also leapfrog the political will problem that Nothando had highlighted, right? Because once we go into these negotiations with these DSPs collectively, we're no longer looking at whether or not this CMO has governmental support in its country. We are saying, here's a bouquet of rights, here's a standard license fee, here's a standard mechanism for you to pay songwriters in each of these territories. It then allows us to leapfrog the lack of legal certainty in some territories, because we're piggybacking off the territories that do have that legal certainty. And also it gives us a bigger bargaining power. You can imagine how some small CMO trying to, in a small territory that doesn't even have that much of an addressable audience for the DSP, going to try and license a big DSP like a YouTube. I mean, YouTube has 2 billion users across the world. Like that number is just mind-boggling. 2 billion people use YouTube every month. It's incredible. So you can imagine the bargaining power they have as a service. So if each of the CMOs across the continent were then trying to license separately, the likelihood is there will be so many of those CMOs that don't get a license, so and many others who get a license in unfavorable terms, and then maybe one or two who have the ability and the skill set who then get a favorable rate. By pulling the resources together and licensing collectively, we then ensure that the highest tide lifts all boats. In that sense, you then get the ability to then say, if you're from a territory that might not have a strong CMO, you still benefiting from getting the same rate that a writer from a territory that does have a strong CMO and do have all the technical capabilities to license gets. And that is something that is very crucial. And then I think there's a third element that I'd like to highlight from, and this is the political space in which the hub then plays in. It then allows also the control of African rights to stay within the African continent, because there are different iterations of these hubs that come from different territories where you see internationals coming in as the Africa to the World movement grows, coming into the continent, extracting the rights and then licensing those rights through their different hubs in pan-European territories or in America or Latin at all, in the Latin spaces. So as that happens, if you no longer are pushed, because now there's a functional way for you to get paid out of your own territory, you then have the ability to then fast track the development of your own local CMO, because there's payment mechanisms that are regular. I mean, we run distribution cycles 4 times a year, which then allows standardization of payment for rights holders. They know if I have had consumptions on digital platforms, I'll be able to earn at least 4 times a year. And also that then gives you the ability to then go back to your home territory CMO and say, actually, I know the money is coming in. I know the licensing has happened. So let's then get the functionality of this CMO up and going. Because the more we externalize the rights, the more we give those rights to international communities, the more they are able to then dictate how the creative industries and the licensing of the creative goods and our cultural goods looks like on our continent.
Thank you so much. That's insightful. Migogo, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just giving Wiseman a viva.
Yes, and I think we just got a deal for you guys. So whoever is close to Angola, there is a comment from social media saying that Angolan musicians do not even have the proper technique and record and broadcast live. So whoever is close to Angola, please get there. There is business for you guys. So another question I had was for Lucy. Whatever we do now and yesterday and tomorrow, we always be feeded by and supported by the media. How does media, well, now, let's take this moment you are in, uncertain times. How does media influence the growth of the music industry? From now on, how can you, what are the advisors, how can you say, what can you say about it?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
So how does media influence the growth of the music industry?
Okay. So I mean, media is a watchdog generally, but if you're talking about media in the cultural space, I think like what we do on Music in Africa is we try and, I would say, promote projects by artists. So just to go back a little bit on what my colleagues were talking about, we have a surge in a lot of new releases. So artists are at home and they're recording and they're collaborating, which is a good thing. And they're putting music online, which is now another source of income. But also you need to have another presence. So if you're perhaps applying for visa for music or Sauti za Busara Festival or Bushfire Festival, so these programmers, they just don't listen to your music. They want to see what are people talking about you, what are people saying about you. So if you release an album, for example, and you send it to us and we give it a good review, then I think that increases your chances of playing at a festival, because you've sort of gotten an approval from the media, So if you release a song and we write about it, then that's also a plus for you. Music in Africa, also we have a section on a profile section, and we take time and edit profiles for artists. And we've gotten feedback from many artists, and they say that they use the profiles that we edit in their press kit. So that is also how we're able to contribute to the music industry, because press kit branding is still a huge problem for many artists, especially here in East Africa. You would ask a musician from South Sudan, for example, to send you their bio, and they send a line or two, and you wonder, what am I supposed to do with this? So those are some of the things that we do on our part as a media organization to support the artists and the creatives. So we also do partner, for example, locally with the Gora Institute here, and we used to do some workshops. And we're hoping to also continue with that next year once we're able to have people gather together. So workshops on branding. These are things that media experts like myself who work in the creative sector, and we understand what these music programmers need. Then that is the contribution that we can also make. Try and mentor artists and give advice on how to brand themselves and how to prepare their press kit, because it all goes. That's like your CV. That's when you give to a music promoter, they decide whether they want to work with you or not. So I think that will be my contribution on that question.
Thank you. Faty, I have a question for you. During these times, we love creating. We music creators and others, they always want to create something. You always have that inspiration that comes in, right? And also during these times, people are intended, mainly the youth, are intended to put things on YouTube, on other platforms, on Twitch, and all those kind of stuff. So sometimes free things have a fee, right? That they become a source of income as well. What will be this advice you can give to people? Sometimes they are limited, to saying, if I put something on YouTube, I won't make money. If I put something on Spotify, I will struggle ABCD. What will be that advice you will give to them?
Well, I just like to echo what my fellow media expert just said about building your messaging, your outreach, and I mean, building your image and tailoring your image for each format. Because as you said earlier about the media and the role of the media with music, but also the role of the media currently, the media is struggling tremendously with the COVID, because we see a huge exodus towards online platforms and social media and citizen media, citizen journalism. We hear these things a lot. So the traditional media is already like dying, and they are operating, whether they like it or not, this transition towards social media platforms. So we see short videos, we see 30 seconds reports, we see WhatsApp is becoming something huge also in terms of reporting. So everyone is trying to, riding this wave of uncertainty. What also so a panelist said, which is extremely important now, that before the musician would build an audience, would meet their public in a closed venue, and then they would meet promoters in another event, and they would meet specific audience at a specific festival, at a specific location. Whereas now everything is equalized and you are face to face with your audience, and you both grow at the same pace, and you have to maintain your presence, otherwise you can't make a living. So these social media platforms, whether they're paid or for free, are still a huge stress for the performer or the musician. So the musician, the performer, and even technicians that work in the music business are becoming influencers. And here's the role of media companies or PR companies. Just like in the 90s, you would hear, well, so and so singer's publicist or this artist's manager said so and so to the media. Now you're on your own. You are your own media person. You are your own influencer. You have your own presence. You have to doctor it, and you have to know what you're saying and give the right messaging, but at the same time be extremely productive and creative and remain out, for them to see you. So it's a huge stress for musicians. A few people have done it here in Morocco that I have the pleasure of watching. Some have already understood the mechanisms of this online transition. I was myself part of a project with multiple musicians from all across the world, and everyone sent their partitions and their part of the video, and it's become a single that is now earning a lot of attention on YouTube. But I mean, artists should get a sense of what are the requirements of social media platforms, and what are the ingredients for them to make it, either on TikTok or Instagram or both, because each one of these sectors, each one of these channels, they have their own codes, their own audiences, and their own ways of doing things.
Thank you so much. I have a question we'll ask later on regarding what you said on TikTok and all. So I would want to, as we conclude, we have a few minutes left. How do we create brands? It's something I think Migogo and Gora will take this one. How do we create from the artists we have now on the continent? I know your band is touring, Gora, so much now. How did you manage to create a brand as an artist for them to be able to move in countries? And I think it's also a question on for Migogo, as you worked in the business environment, on how do we create a brand in this industry?
Thanks. So I think with the band that I manage, Makoomba, it's been a lot of hard work, in the sense that in the context of Zimbabwe, they come from the corner of the country where it's Victoria Falls. 4 different countries meet, and the languages are a bit different from the mainstream. So developing inside of Zimbabwe, for example, was a slow burn, because there was that sort of language difference. And then what we had to do was to try to focus on our niche audience, an audience that we thought would like our music. But it was also natural, in the sense that being in Vic Falls means you're automatically international. It's the most international place in the country, because of the sort of the tourism and all these inter-country sort of relations. So we have benefited immensely from, I think, music industry networking and showcasing platforms. So we have done Womex, we've done Visa for Music, we've done Moshito, we've done Access. We've done quite a number of on the continent and off, in terms of sort of just showcasing, putting our brand out there. And also the press has been a really big help. So working with publicists to make sure that our music and our albums are out in critical media that gets sort of read by gatekeepers, and we have also had lucky breaks. Like, for example, in 2012, we had a break to perform live on live with Jules Holland, right? And that was to an audience of more than 10 million people for that BBC show. And it really did open up sort of audiences, and we performed at the Apollo, for example. It's been a series of sort of lucky breaks, but then sometimes positioning. So I think it's knowing exactly what the product is. And the other word of caution has been to not let your brand be, even when you're desperate, not let it be supported by controversial entities. So, for example, political parties or some NGOs that are really just pushing their own agendas at the expense of what the artist really thinks and what the image is really sort of trying to sort of because you lose your audience, I think, if then all of a sudden as an artist, all you're now singing about is male circumcision or whatever, like, you know, because we have had those instances where artists get given some money and all of a sudden the music that was resonating with their audience and the messages that were impacting their communities and mirroring their communities get abandoned for some random sort of NGO stuff. So it's not a critique on all these other entities. Sometimes they come in really handy, but it's really making a concise and sure sort of decision as to how and who you partner with.
Thank you so much. Migogo, do you want to add on something?
Okay, I'll just, I suppose, add on very quickly because I can look at the time. I agree with you in that it has to be a combination of sort of a deliberate brand development and positioning, but you cannot run away from the organic growth that comes from, you know, connecting with your audiences. So, I mean, from a sort of deliberate aspect, it's, for me, it's, you know, talking about looking at the analytics, who's streaming your music from where, and then understanding how to position to them, how to talk to them, be very deliberate about what you stand for. So, you know, if you do get sponsorship deals, what you just mentioned, Gora, now about, you know, choosing who you align with, it's so important because, you know, artists should be able to say no to a brand. If this brand offers me money, but they do not align with my brand, you should be able to say no. So, and that comes with being very conscious and, you know, aware of what your brand stands for. But I mean, if you look at the other aspect, organic growth, I'm learning a lot now actually about music, the music sectors and the genres that are not necessarily supported greatly by the media. Because I mean, the media generally tends to, you know, align itself with the popular, you know, the big genres, big in inverted commas. But in South Africa, we have a genre called Maskandi, and Maskandi doesn't enjoy big media. I mean, you won't see them on the music channels that we all watch, and you won't necessarily read about them in what we understand to be the mainstream music media. But those artists have such strong links with their fans. They just need to send a WhatsApp or a tweet and say, guys, let's meet here, and people will come because they have a genuine connection with their fans. They talk directly to their fans. They, you know, they don't talk at them. They're part of that community. So it's part of, so that's the organic growth I'm talking about, really being connected with your audience and engaging them in a very genuine way. And of course, then the deliberate positioning.
Thank you so much. So I think we are at the end. We had so much to say and so much wisdom to give out, but unfortunately we won't have time for that. But what is for sure is this is a time that we have to reflect on our businesses and renovate again, and technology will always be around. We won't have to choose between live and digital. It will always be the both of them. But how can we make it the digital, make it as real as possible, is now the question to everyone, every creator. And we believe with with the creators we are, nothing will be impossible. And this is a very good and interesting times for us to even create more. And we thank you, Visa for Music, having us. Thank you to all the panelists. It was a great pleasure and honor to be along with you guys. That was mind-blowing. All the insights, all the things I learned today. Thank you so much. And let's keep pushing our boundaries and making things happen. So peace.